thank you everyone for joining today's Lean Bites. I'm Danielle Bremer. For those that don't know me, I'm the Chief Growth Officer here at Lean Techniques. If this is your first time here, welcome. As a reminder, these are 16-minute talks where we work to provide you with simple, practical tips and techniques you can start applying within your organization today. Couple quick housekeeping items. Number one, if you have any questions about today's talk, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll either address them at the end if time allows or offer more insight in our follow-up email. And number two is please do us a huge favor and complete the survey that will automatically pop up at the end of the session. Your feedback is important to us. So with that, let's get started. I'm excited to introduce Alec Harrison, our technical consultant and one of our in-house AI leaders here at Lean Techniques. Alec, I'll hand it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Danielle. And if everybody wants to drop some questions in the chat, I'll do my best to watch them. I think Danielle will help me there as well too. So we'll be sure to answer offline too if time doesn't allow it. But being in AI, I really like to do some real life demos. So we'll go ahead and try to do some level setting in case you're kind of newer to the AI front. We'll talk about some basic concepts of AI, and then we'll go into some live demos as well. With the caveat of live demos, sometimes it doesn't always go to plan. So we'll see how this goes. If you don't know me, I'm Alec Harrison. As Danielle said, a technical consultant. I have a podcast, which is what the QR code is. A couple pictures. I have 2 dogs and a wife, and run a few user groups. If you're around the Midwest and use Azure, hopefully you join my user groups from time to time. If not, you should check them out. So at a very high level overview, who is using AI today? Do we have like reactions in the chat, drop things? So I think this is really good with this kind of definition. I see one hand raised. So when we talk AI, a lot of people get caught up in kind of the chat GPT and all the cool marketing buzz around all the new tools and things out there today. When realistically, AI itself is kind of I'm not going to say basic, but it's a lot more ingrained in what we do day in and day out than people realize. If you use a spam filter in your email, there's any sort of auto detection there at all. You're using AI today. Spell check or predictive text when you're typing, that's AI. It's not as cool and crazy as generative, but a lot of people are probably using AI more and more than they realize. So I like to start off with this kind of slide of AI itself is kind of this big overall umbrellas, and I like to think of it as tricking a rock to think like a human, right? We're taking essentially metal and having it think like we do. Then you have machine learning, which is using statistics to try to pull insights out of data. And then you have deep learning, which is mapping neural networks together to make it work like a human brain would. So you start mapping different things together, different points, and you can start pulling more data and analytics out of there. And then generative AI is using neural networks to then create new stuff. So stuff that has never been created before. It might be imitating things that it's seen before, but it's truly a net new kind of thing. So just to lay down, I know a lot of times people are talking AI, especially lately, and they're really referring to generative AI, but I always like to do this. If anybody ever asks if you use AI, you can almost always say, well, I do, because I use spell check in Word, or I have predictive text in Google Drive, all that sort of fun stuff. So at a very high level, what we're going to be showing today is RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. This was a image generated by AI. I believe the prompt was AI on the phone. So there's kind of 2 different main concepts if you're going to be using an off-the-shelf model. There is RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, and then there's fine tuning. If you want to have more data than whatever the model is trained on today, which if you join this call, you probably have enterprise data that you want the model to be able to use or answer. You have 2 main options. You can fine tune the model, which requires a ton of training data and requires you to then host your own special flavor of the model that has been trained on your data. So you have to pay for the training time. You have to pay to find the right data. You have to then train it, make sure it's getting the right accuracies that you're expecting. And it's a lot of work and can be pretty costly. Versus you can also use RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. I also kind of think of it as the difference of phoning a friend for help. So you can have your data sources as they exist today in RAG, and the model will more or less reach out to them and say like, hey, I don't necessarily know this. I'm going to call a buddy. with calling a buddy like on a game show, right? It does take a little longer than if you just learn the data yourself, but it's more cost effective. And especially if you're trying to pilot out AI in your corporation, it might be good enough for what you guys are doing. It might be the 90% cases of, most of our use cases are covered by RAG. We don't need to spend the time, effort, or resources to fine tune a model, then maintain the model or any of that. If you're going to go down the RAG pattern or any of the patterns, you're going to have to think about chunking. So that is essentially when you take your search index, you have to do some trade-offs between how big do you make each chunk or set of data in your search index versus how much do you make then AI or the LLM do the mileage to actually try to find your answer. So there's trade-offs there, right? Like the smaller your data sources, the greater chance that you're not going to find enough relevant data to pull back a right answer. But the bigger the data sources, the more mileage you're going to have to put on the LLM and spend more tokens to have it be able to grab what you're looking for because it's going to take longer to go through each incremental data set. And then your data strategy. How do we get data and expose it to our model? With Azure, it is under Azure's data privacy and security. I believe it's the same for AWS and GCP as well. So your data is yours. It won't go back into the model, but you do need to have a strategy internally of how are we going to do this? How often do we want the data to be sourced? Do we want to track deletes? Do we want to only have updates? What kind of strategy are we going to put behind there? And then the next thing I would say is try to get started today. So we'll go ahead and jump into a demo. So we're going to start, if you haven't used this before, this is Azure OpenAI's interface, and we are going to add a data source. So just at a high level, completions are going to be kind of your most simple AI question and answer bot. It has no memory. It won't remember anything from question to question. You can just ask the LLM a question. It'll give you the answer, and then it forgets about everything. I was hoping to do assistance, but as you can see, we have some issues with that today. I think that's an Azure thing, but we can roll with the punches. That's where the live demos are always fun. An assistant is kind of a configurable chat instance that you can save, re-import, and use at a later date. You can also have it hook into functions, which it could be like API calls, so you can bring other data sources in other than just files. But sometimes with real live demos and in the real world, things don't go as planned. So we're going to go ahead and use a chat instance. The biggest difference here is once enough time has passed, it's going to forget this configuration. So we will have to go in and either re-go through the UI. All of our indexes and our data sources and the chunking will remain, but it won't be auto-saved in here on the side that you'll notice here in a second. So for the most simple enterprise data I think we have is a lot of people have PDFs or different data sets. So think of your onboarding documents, your benefits for your health insurance, any of those kind of things. We can use that. So I'm going to go through and pick my Azure AI search index. And this is just going to be index 1. We're going to upload a file. So in this case, I always like to make the joke that just because I'm in tech, that means I'm the family printer and computer repairman as well. So for a fun data set, I always just upload a printer manual. This is the printer I have. So we'll go ahead and hit next. Keyword search. We'll save and close. And you'll notice here on the left, we have the data ingestion starting. This is behind the scenes creating a search index, trying its best to map the data to a model that the search index can then make sense of. Actually chunking up the data. We clicked through it. We're doing 1024 sizes. And then it will wire it up to the Azure OpenAI instance. And we'll see here, it did find our one file. We can kind of skip ahead. There's another option too that you can use for indexing websites. So this one's kind of fun. This is my personal blog, so I can ask it, what are the 3 most recent blog posts? And we'll see. Interesting. What is the blog about? There we go. So we do have some data. This is where prompt engineering can come into play of depending on how you ask your question or depending on how it indexes the data, it might not be able to see or know that this is the date of publish. So we might have to do that. We can also change in here. There's a term called system messaging. So you can actually give your bot or your assistant a persona, and they've proven that statistically you get better results with that. So through prompt engineering and building a better system message, we could tweak this bot to be a little better, saying like you're an AI assistant that helps find people information on a blog. And we could go through there and really fine tune and fine tweak this message. There is some example templates. So if you're looking on how to do that, we can go here and they have some for an IRS chatbot. And then they have sample user questions and answers as well. So if we kick back over here, we'll see that our data is connected. So it truncated it because it was trying to just index it all into one data set. So if I come over here, because our PDF was too big and we basically just said throw it all in one chunk, it's going to auto chunk it for us. So let's ask it something like, what are the control panel buttons and the lights? And it's going to tell us that the control panel buttons of lights, and it's essentially going to kick out all of these different things of what they are, what they're used for, and it's then pulling data from our PDF. So you can do this. It also shows references too. So this is in the responsible AI kind of practice of having explainability and traceability of why it's doing what it's doing. We can go through here and as a part of OpenAI, get that access. We also get the REST query that it made. So this is just simple JSON. This is the system message we talked about just a little bit ago. We then have the user input, and then the assistant is the data that comes back. But yeah, you can go ahead and feed through this with any sort of documents you have. We didn't go super. Let's remove our data source. You can get started today with any of these: Azure AI Search, Azure Blob Storage, Cosmos, Elasticsearch, any sort of website URL or files. There are also some more experimental data types for Azure AI Search. So as long as you have your AI Search instance there as well, you could go ahead and get started playing today. One thing, if you haven't done this before, you will have to go to Azure OpenAI Service and go here to apply for access. It is GA, but it is gated by an approval process. I've seen them take about a day or two to approve it. So if you do want to get started right after this call, just know you're going to probably have to wait 24 to 48 hours. And then I also put together a workshop here. This is where this document's from, of building a universal translator. So layering on a few different AI services as well. So with that, I think we're at the end here. If there's any questions, comments.
Nice work making it just under time.
Looking
It's
at
like
the
you've done
clock,
this before.
talking a little quick.
All right, any questions? Any brave folks are willing to ask right now? All right.
I will
Doesn't look
ask
good.
one
Oh,
question.
yeah, please.
Alec, will you follow up on how to expose this in my service somewhere besides in the portal? Can
Yeah.
you use it somewhere else? Yeah.
Yeah. So all of these, I think behind the scenes are using APEM. So everywhere that you get this, we can actually go to the view code sample. So we have Python, JSON, C#, and curl. So there's an API
gotcha.
endpoint that you can just then, anything that can make a REST call can hit this, given the right keys.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up Lean Bites. Thank you all for attending. As a reminder, we'd love to hear what you thought of today's session. So a survey will pop up and we'd hope you'd take a minute to share your feedback. And don't forget to join us next month on the first Tuesday at 11:45. One of our product leaders, Peter Trudakowski, will be talking about product on a platform team. So you don't want to miss it. Be sure to check out our website or LinkedIn page for any more details. Have a good rest of your day and a good lunch ahead. Thanks all.